Hey, and welcome back to St. Michael's Lent. I'm Shane Smith here at Franciscan University of Steubenville, Ohio, to talk about vices and virtues with some experts. Today I'm chatting with Heather Kim. Heather Kim is the co-host of the popular Abiding Together podcast. She and her husband Jake are the co-founders of Life Restoration Ministries, where she serves as Director of Vision and Ministry. She's also the author of 2 books, Encountering Emmanuel and Abide, a pathway to transformative healing and intimacy with Jesus. Thank you so much for being with me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
I'm very happy to be here. We're here today to talk about virtues and vices, which is not the smallest conversation to have the first time you meet someone.
Yeah, I know. It's an interesting way to meet each other. For
Yeah. It's not exactly like first time hanging out territory, but here we are to talk about it. So I guess we could begin by saying what are your thoughts on vices and virtues? Do you have any particular things going on in your life you want to talk to me about?
We're entering into confession time with Heather and Shane.
Yeah.
No, I think as I've thought about this topic over many years, I think just growing up in the church, you're constantly like wrestling with these things. And I think before my approach was, what do I need to do? What do I need to do right? What am I doing wrong? How do I need to change it? It just felt like an approach of rules, and then how do I change my behavior? And just as I've grown in my relationship with God, I've realized it's really more about love. It's like, how can I love better?
Yeah.
What are the ways that I'm not loving? How can I love better? And how can I be more receptive to the love of God in my life?
Yeah, I always find that the Ordo Amoris, kind of the order of love for everyone who doesn't speak Latin, which, by the way, I'm not smart. I know that I just use Latin words, but I have no idea what I'm doing. But the order of love, the idea of God first and then all things follow, really is like the answer to all vice, all virtue, all issues in the church kind of begin up there and then cascade down. Mm-hmm. And so to order God first just sort of naturally puts me in a position to be virtuous and to battle vice. Whereas I kind of thought when I first converted that I would be baptized. And then in my head, I was like, I have superpowers now, and now I don't sin anymore. And then you find yourself sinning, and it's a devastating first realization, like, oh, I don't think I'm that much better. I have a lot of work to do.
Yeah. And I think, like you're saying, the tendency for all of us is to approach our spiritual life with self-reliance. Like, just like, what do I need to do? What can I do? It's on me, to make it right. And really, it's how do I become more dependent on God and the power that is available to me as a son or daughter of God to be able to love well.
Yeah. Sloth.
Yeah.
Sloth is an interesting one because I feel like of all the deadly sins, it is almost the most insidious and like, well, I don't have to worry about that when I go to work 5 days a week.
Yeah. I would say it's actually the most pervasive, especially in the culture today. And I think, miss it because we can put a lot of things over it, almost like suits or masks or whatever to make it look like something else.
Yeah.
And I think it is actually everywhere. And I think at the core of it, there is a tie to meaninglessness. That if our life doesn't have meaning, and we can't find meaning, which is what we were made for in certain ways, and we can break that open a little bit, then it leads to sloth in our life, which is kind of a sleepiness, like a laziness about life. And why is that occurring? And I think it's because there's a loss of meaning that many people are experiencing.
That's so interesting. As Americans, especially, or people just in North America in general, we have this culture of capitalism. We're in late stage capitalism or whatever people want to call it, where everyone is on the hustle. Mm-hmm. Everyone has 2 jobs. Everyone's trying to make as much money as they can. And as a culture, we've really driven each other to work as hard as possible in order to accumulate wealth and status in whatever community. And so I think that we feel exempt from sloth because we're, as a culture, all pushing ourselves towards these goals or whatever, or motivating. You got to work every day. You got to get into the gym every day. You got to hustle. You got to have your second job, and then you go, oh, well, sloth is not even a thing I'm worried about because I'm a hard worker. But I do think sloth, like you said, it is so tied to meaning And meaning isn't tied to what you do, it's how you do it. Like the idea that you can sanctify your work, no matter what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really beautiful in a way to like draw meaning into anything you do. And that's not a very American concept. We really like to undignify certain types of work and put it beneath us.
Yeah.
I can't remember who said it, but I think an Englishman said Americans are all humiliated millionaires.
Wow.
And that's how we act. And so sloth, especially in this country, is so pervasive, I think, because people, they're worried about what they're doing, not how they're doing it. Whereas I think if you're the janitor at a school, firstly, all work is dignified. Any working class person is afforded all the dignity they're due. But all work in general is dignified. And then to do that work in a way that honors God is the way to like draw meaning into your life and give yourself mental respite from all these other problems that work gives you. And people just don't do that. There's this quote by Fulton Sheen that I really, really like. And basically it says, sloth may be physical or spiritual. It is physical when it shows itself in laziness, procrastination, idleness, softness, indifference, and nonchalance. It is spiritual when it shows itself in an indifference to character betterment, a distaste for the spiritual, a hurried crowding of devotions, lukewarmness, and failure to cultivate virtue.
Yeah.
The spiritual sloth is, I think, the one that we're all missing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
yeah, exactly. And it's interesting that you're talking about like even hyperactivity, because Thomas Aquinas and the Desert Fathers, they talk about that as one of the underpinning things of sloth. Like the deeper spiritual dynamic is called acedia. And within that, there is a hyperactivity that they articulate in there, and I think that is the distracted life. It's I'm distracted and filling my life with a whole bunch of things without actually making a gift of myself. And many people know John Paul II, his famous quote, like, man cannot fully find himself until he makes a sincere gift of himself. So if we're doing our work in a utilitarian way, or we're approaching relationships or other things in our life, just looking at what we can get from it instead of how can I make a gift of myself here, then it loses meaning, because that's what we're made for. We're made in the image of the Trinity. The Trinity is a gift. Like they are constantly giving themselves to each other in love. And so when we are not living in the image that we're created in, then of course we lose our meaning, and it leads to all these things. Then I don't care. I'm not, even though I might be busy per se, there's still this, nonchalant sort of attitude, not really caring, because it's not stoking that fire. We are made to live life to the full, and we are made to get the most out of life, to live with joy, to live with love, to live with passion, all directed towards the good. Right?
Yeah. That's so beautiful. I really love that. That's one of my favorite things, and something that I personally, when I was reading about sloth, I read about all 7 deadly sins for this, which was, I was in Australia, and I had like plenty of time to read, and so I was just really crushing through stuff. And I remember reading sloth and being like, yeah, this is a lack of passion, is what I see. Like, people don't sanctify their work, and so they don't have the correct amount of passion.
Yeah, there's a great book called The Noonday Devil. And that's the name that he gives to sloth and acedia, is the noonday devil, because the Desert Fathers, when they would be like in their cell, but it was like, really hot, obviously, it's like around the middle of the day is when it would be the hardest, when they would be tempted the most to give up on everything. And in this book, his name is Jean-Charles No. He says it's not a matter of fighting with clenched teeth, but of consenting to let oneself be loved. Don't you love that?
Yeah, I really do.
Yeah, because often we think, well, we're in a spiritual battle, and yes, we do need to fight. But then on the other hand, I'll go back to the self-reliant thing, because I think it's so easy, even in our spiritual life, for us to keep going in a direction of like, I'm just white-knuckling my way through life, instead of this openness and surrender to love. And I think in the culture today, because we are feasting on so many things that are meaningless, and we can justify it, like, I'm tired, so just scrolling on Instagram and looking at puppy reels is good for me right now. It's relief from like all the whatever. And not to say that that's wrong in and of itself, but I think there is a tendency for us to just feast on so many things that are meaningless. And it's almost like just eating McDonald's every single day and expecting that that's going to nourish us.
Yeah.
And then we're surprised when the outcome is that we're tired and we feel this disdain almost for spiritual things that require something of us, that require vulnerability and require surrender and require self-gift. Whereas what the world is offering is just saying, if it requires too much of you, then just get rid of it. That's an inconvenience to you at this point.
Right.
You know,
It's so interesting. It would be like if you spent all day at McDonald's and you got so full that then you went to Mass and you were like, I can't have the Eucharist. I'm too full of double cheeseburgers.
Yeah.
And then to imagine that, I'm sure every Catholic, any person hearing this imagines that situation and they're like, oh, horrific. But we do put ourselves in that situation spiritually all the time.
Yeah, of course. And I know we're throwing out a few quotes here, but there are just so many wise people that we can learn from that articulate things that are happening in our heart that often we don't recognize. And C.S. Lewis in The Weight of Glory, he says, we're half-hearted creatures fooling around with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is being offered to us. And that is so convicting to me. Every time I read that, I'm like, oh, there's so many times that we're settling.
Yes.
When there is a feast, when there is infinite joy being offered to us. And, you know, when we think about the virtue side of sloth, like what would be the opposing virtue to sloth, I do think it's love.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. I think like love is what rouses the heart. Love is where passion is. Love is, I mean, I think we're exhausted because we're not allowing ourselves to be loved.
Right.
And we're not loving others well.
It's funny because doing this, I was like, what is the opposite of sloth? And I was trying to think of it, and I was like, is it prudence? And I was kind of trying to think. And then I was thinking about every deadly sin. And love truly is the answer to every sin. But the opposite of sloth being love is something that I think a lot of people won't have thought about or sort of won't have internalized just because it's almost too obvious. You know, like, oh man, I'm lazy. I should do something about it. It's like, well, but if you allowed yourself to be loved, you would be less spiritually lazy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it changes you. Like I've experienced that. When I was young, I had an experience with the love of God that radically changed my life. Like I was just not living a good life. I was sinning a lot, and the love of God broke into my heart. And from that day, I've not been perfect. I've sinned a lot since then, you know.
Yeah.
But I can say I have just had a hunger for His presence that has not quit, because once you've tasted it, nothing else will get you there. Like
Yeah,
it just
no, I'm with you.
nothing else. I mean, that's very much St. Augustine and anybody who has really experienced the love of God. It's like everything else pales in comparison to that.
Right. Yeah, that's so real. The passion that you feel when you have that in your life as compared to a time that you didn't is so stark and so incredible that I don't know how I could ever go back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I love that. Well, thank you so much. I feel like we really nailed this. I'm really happy with it. Awesome. Heather, it was so nice to meet you. Thank you so much for the conversation. And is there anything you want to say before we get out of here?
No, it's a pleasure to be with you. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming out and having this conversation with me. I appreciate you.
Yeah, God bless.
God bless.